It's a very strange thing that when I first went to meet Deshikachar long time ago, it was in the context of fairly intense personal trauma I was going through. And I had met J. Krishnamurti a few months before that. And when I went to see Deshikachar, he asked me why I want to learn yoga. And this was after rebuffing me a couple of times, saying, come after a couple of months. It's the usual thing these people do, right? So finally I told him, look, I have this vision or this idea that I have to bring together the Yoga Sutras and psychology. And at that point of time, I had no idea of psychology. I had no idea of Yoga Sutra. And I still don't know why I said that. But anyway, when I said that, he looked at me and said, okay, come. So that's how we started this whole journey. And it's an interesting thing that I think a couple of years later was when I started engaging with process work. And then I met another Krishna there, which is Pulan Krishna Garg. So there have been these three Krishnas who, in a sense, influence whatever I'm going to do today. Om Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena Yopa Karotam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranatosmi Abahu Purushakaram Shankachakrasidharinam Sahasra Shirasam Shvetam Pranamami Patanjalim Srimate Anantaya Nagarajaya Namo Namaha. Om. This shloka is, kind of tells you who Patanjali was. And it's an important thing that he's supposed to have initiated three things. One is he's supposed to have written the Sri Bhashya, which is the commentary for grammar. So that's one of the things that is there in the shloka that says for Vacham, for speech, he talked about the Sri Bhashya, which subsequently has become the basis for talking about intelligence and learning and things like that, and Chomsky refers to some of his work. He's also supposed to have done a lot of work in Ayurveda and in yoga. The work that he's done for yoga, he's called a Muni. For me, Patanjali is Krishnamacharya, because it's through his voice that I've heard this, and Deshikachar. I'm going to give you an initial background about where the yoga as a philosophy stands in the pantheon of the Indian philosophy. Then I'm going to give you some background about the Sankhya theory, and usually Sankhya and yoga are treated as one. But Sankhya came before, and a lot of ideas in Sankhya are taken into yoga. The only difference between Sankhya and yoga philosophically is the word Ishvara never appears in Sankhya, whereas in yoga it appears a couple of times. But otherwise there's no reference to a Godhead in a sense. See, let me give you a very quick overview of this, because it's usually a confusing thing. See, there's a whole band of philosophical thought and discourse that's been happening in India over a long period of time. One end of it is Mimamsa. And usually Mimamsa refers to ritualistic religion. Yeah, which is all the prayers and all of this. And the word Veda, unfortunately, in English translation is treated as though it's only the holy books. We don't have any such thing in India as the holy books. Veda simply means knowledge. So everything, including uh, Ayurveda, and all of these are part of that whole thing. These are called Upavedas, and then they're called some major Vedas and things like that. In the Vedas itself, you'll find a whole range of things. You'll find deep reflective statements about the nature of reality. You'll find statements about health. You'll find statements about metallurgy in Atharva Veda. You'll find all kinds of range of statements. So the whole thing is called the Vedas. So one part of it is this. There is a part of this which is usually referred to as the Vedanta, which is generally also called Upanishads. Yoga and Sankhya is somewhere in the middle. And then you have more materialistic things like Vaiseshika, Nyaya, and then you have Buddhist, Jain, and you have some other branches here, and then finally you have the Charuvakas. Yeah, Charuvaka is completely materialistic, and it says that talking about anything that you can't see is completely unnecessary, and therefore there are only 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. You can't show sky, so why you want to talk about space? And that everything that happens can be explained through the combinations of these 4. That everything is a chemical, mechanical intermixture and play of these 4 forces. And therefore, the end of life is pleasure. What stops pleasure is fear. Overcome fear and enjoy your life as much as possible. These are called Avaidik in the sense that they don't agree with the Vedas. Now, there's some controversy about whether Vaiseshika and Nyaya agree with the Vedas or not. Some people think that they do. Some people don't agree with this. But these two are anyway, this talks about the nature of reality and talks about how to define things. What is an object? What is Dravya? How do you define? And it's tremendously detailed in the way you have to define things. Yeah? And what's the logic of definition? And Nyaya is logic, pure logic. Now, Yoga and Sankhya don't defy or deny the Vedas, so they're usually included as part of the Vedas. But one of the popular things about how Sankhya starts is that Sankhya starts by saying that if you believe that Agni is the agent of God, and that by doing all these yajnas, you're going to send all these messages to God, why don't you jump in? Because you'll then go straight to God. Yeah? And then Sankhya and Yoga attack Charuvaka, saying if it's only these 4 and all of that, how can you explain so many things that happen in the world which require understanding and explanation of things much beyond what we can see and how we can think? So it's actually in the middle, it attacks both. And then sets out its own Siddhanta. Yeah? Many ideas in the Upanishads are very close to yoga. And there are many ideas in Buddhist thought which are actually a restatement of the Yoga Sutra in Pali. Except that Buddhist thought does not agree with the Vedas. To me, the major difference between this and Buddhist thought is that while this keeps quiet about social reality, Buddhist thought clearly says if this is the truth, then this social reality is not acceptable. Whereas Yoga and Sankhya doesn't do that, it just keeps quiet about social reality. The same with the Upanishads. The Upanishads are included in the Vedas because most of the rishis who were also practicing this were practicing this. But it's a very interesting thing. Most of the Upanishads will start with something like this. There'll be a fairly well-known person because he'll be named. And he will go to a teacher. And he'll start off by saying, I've studied astronomy, astrology, I've studied all the Vedas, I've studied geometry, I've studied mathematics. And then he'll say that I've not crossed the ocean of sorrow. Yeah, Shokasya param tarayatviti. Therefore, can you teach me something that will help me to end sorrow? And then the Upanishadic, Vedantic thing starts. So even here it's very clear, there's Paravidya and Aparavidya. That learning that helps you transcend sorrow, and that learning that does not help you transcend sorrow.
You mentioned about yoga and Sankhya not connecting with social reality.
Yoga Sutra does not have any comment about social reality.
Okay. Okay, and
whereas some of the Buddhist texts, and including Buddha's some of his statements, he clearly talks about society and all that. That's
right.
One difference.
Right.
There's very little else that I see different.
Okay.
Does Gita picture anywhere?
Gita is a much later text. See, Sankhya is supposed to be the first text. See, Sankhya as we know it comes from later teachers who refer to this. But even the Sankhya Karika is a later text. The original, where it quotes Kapila and things like that. So we don't have the original first Sankhya set of statements. But many of their statements are fundamental to much of Indian thought. Now, almost all of Indian thought, I would say. Yeah.
Any record of dates or antiquity? Any estimates?
Yoga is dated around 500 BC. That's the usual accepted date. And in all of these, there's a controversy. They keep pushing it up and down. But most people talk about it. Most people also say that Lao Tzu, Patanjali, Buddha, all of these people are around the same time. And there's some Greek philosopher also around the same time. Most of the texts that are called darshanas have a specific design brief, in a sense. The design brief is that this text ought to help you reflect on yourself. It ought to be like a mirror. Or it helps you to have an insight into the true nature of reality. Okay? And for our work, treating it as a mirror makes a lot more sense than treating it as a statement of reality, because then what we are doing is, with our brain, we are trying to interpret a word as though we understand that reality, when our brain and our mind is actually not capable of comprehending that reality. So for any practice, treating a darshana as a mirror to myself is the only pragmatic thing to do. Otherwise, you get into debate. You don't get into examination and dialogue. Okay, and yoga is definitely a darshana. Yeah? Now, there are two extremely important concepts which underlie yoga in particular, and I think all Indian thought. One is called Sattvadam and Parinamavadam. See, Sattvadam means, Vada, I think, would be, translation would be doctrine, maybe, because there is no dogma here. Maybe doctrine is a better word. And I'm going to have difficulty in translating these into English. I'll tell you why in just a minute. So Satvada means that which is. Okay? Parinamavada means change. Okay? So what it is saying is that what I perceive at this moment is true. What I experience in this moment is true, whatever I experience. But whatever I experience in this moment is changing. Okay, and these are simultaneous. Okay, now there are related words which don't appear in yoga. One word is Maya, and the other word is Satya. And both of them come clearly in the Upanishads, and they are defined in the Upanishads. Okay, and it means exactly the same thing. Maya means ma is to measure, and ya means to disappear. So that which is measurable is disappearing. That is why it is Maya. Now the English translation that says illusion is completely wrong. Okay, this world is real, but the world that I am experiencing, which I can measure, has vanished. That's the nature of reality. Okay? Satya is again defined as this. Yat sa tat sat. That this word sa means that which is. Yatti tan maranam. Ti is death. Yad yam tena ubhe yachati. Yam is that word that refers to the bridging between life and death. Yeah? And it comes in an Upanishad that talks about what is reality and then says what is behind it, what is behind it, what is behind it, what is behind it, or what is more basic, more foundational. And then the questioner stops at a point where they talk about prana, and then the teacher goes on to talk about Satya as the base from which prana comes. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So that's what these two words mean, and it reflects the same as this. And also the word Brahma simply means Briha Brahi Vriddhau, that which is constantly evolving and changing and moving. Yeah? So they are all words that refer to the same underlying reality. Okay? And one of the Upanishads, after talking about all of this, comes back and says, Annam na nindyat. Don't have anything negative to say about matter.